Hello, my name is Matt Reed, and I work on the Crate Marketplace team here at Roost. Today I'm going to be demoing some of the additions we've made for Hudu into our existing Document Microsoft 365 crates. We currently have 4 Document Microsoft 365 crates in the marketplace. They are Document Microsoft 365 environments. This crate will display some important information about a customer's environment, such as user counts, domain information, licenses, and privileged group membership. We also have a Document Microsoft 365 Users crate. This will document all users in an environment and provide details such as group membership, creation date, last password change, and mailbox information. We then have a Document M365 Shared Mailboxes crate. This provides information like what users have send as access or full access, as well as the aliases for that shared mailbox. And finally, we have a Document Microsoft 365 Groups crate. Here you get a list of groups within an environment, which shows things like member count, group type, and a list of group members. Here we'll dig into the Document Microsoft 365 environments crate a little bit more. First thing we do is we create a variable for the documentation platform. We do this by using some Jinja to check an input variable to see if it's going to be Hudu or IT glue. If that's not defined, we look for an org variable to be set for the documentation platform. If that's not defined, we default and choose whichever integration you have already installed. We use this variable to branch in various parts to keep this pretty extensible. A lot of the gathering information we do is going to be used the same for Hudu and IT glue, but with our differences, we do a little bit of branching here based on the transition. So in this case, we're looking for the documentation platform to equal Hudu. If it does, we're going to run a quick little test to ensure that the documentation platform is set up properly. We're doing a list companies, and if that returns valid information, we are going to go to the next step. Because this workflow is designed to run at the top organization level, we're first going to check and make sure that that's the case. So this sub workflow ensures that we're running at the top level, and if it doesn't, it's going to gracefully exit the workflow. Otherwise, it's going to move down to the next step. In the next step, we are going to be listing all organizations. This is going to grab all the sub-organizations in Roost, and ultimately we'll be putting this into a variable called all organizations. We'll be passing this down to some of the sub-workflows so that it loops through and gathers information from all the different sub-orgs for you. We're going to do one more branch here, which is the same as the one from above, making sure that we're looking at Hudu. If that's the case, we're going to hop into this sub-workflow, which contains a couple other sub workflows for making sure that our asset layout is valid and there, and also gathering the information from Microsoft 365. So let's first take a look at making sure that the asset layout exists. So we do this by checking the asset layout name, which we have defined in the crate. If it does exist, it's going to exit the workflow and give us the ID of that asset layout so we can use it later on when creating the individual assets. If it doesn't exist, we're going to go ahead and create it. And if you notice, this has a transition here with the different crate names. Since we're using the Document Microsoft 365 environments, we're going to be checking to see if that asset layout name exists. And if it does, we're going to go down this path. We're going to be using the create asset layout action here. Pretty straightforward. We are going to provide the different field types that we need. So first thing we do is put in a field type, which will be like a text or a checkbox or an asset tag or a heading. And then we're going to provide it a label. And this will ultimately be how we update the assets in a later step. And finally, we provided a position. These are the required fields for asset layout fields. And then finally, we're going to pass it an asset layout name, and this will be what it was passed in from the sub workflow. Next, we'll make sure that the asset is set to active. So we do one more call here, and we pass the information in an object and set the active flag to true. This will make it so it shows up on the left-hand menu within Hudu. Once we get the asset layout ID, we're going to move to gathering information from Microsoft and posting it over to Hudu. We're passing that asset layout ID to this sub workflow. You'll notice that it is using our all organizations variable as a with items. So this will be looping through each individual org and running as org the sub workflow. We'll hop into this sub and take a look at a little bit more information. So this part is pretty straightforward. We're going to be creating an object with all of the information we gather from Microsoft. So we're doing various graph calls here, getting tenant information, getting domain information. We have some sub workflows for getting privileged group information as well as license information. And we're ultimately combining this into one big object that we will later on pass down to another sub workflow in order to create the individual assets. So this is what the sub workflow that's going to create those assets. We are going to be passing a unique field in. This is going to be our object that contains all of our information from Microsoft. We're passing it our asset layout ID as well as our asset layout name. This is where we're going to either insert or update an individual asset. This looks a lot similar to our asset layout creation, but in this case, we do have the ability to update assets. So we're going to be checking to see if the asset already exists. If there is one found, it's going to update it. If not, we're going to create it. I'll go down the creation path here. Again, much like our asset layout creation, we're going to be checking to see which crate this is running from and going down that path. In order to create the individual assets, we're going to need to grab the asset field IDs. So we're going to be pulling the information again from the different asset layouts and storing that in a variable here. This is going to give us our individual asset fields. We have a little bit of Jinja that is going to pull a label and an ID. Ultimately, we'll be doing a name match off of the label later on to get the ID. So we have this object created so we can easily do that later on. And this is where we're going to do the creation of the asset. So we're going to be pulling the asset layout that we have from the previous step, piping that in here. Then we're going to be putting the asset name in. In this case, we're going to be using the tenant display name as what the asset will be titled. This is where we're going to populate our asset fields. So we're taking the information from our previous asset tags, or excuse me, asset fields variable, and we're going to be looping through that and trying to do a name match to ultimately gather the ID that we need to pass to this action. So once we do that, we're going to then take our object that we created with all the information from Microsoft and post it as the value into the field. We do that a bunch of times to populate all the different information, and then we finish. We'll hop back to the calling sub workflow all the way up, and that concludes the workflow here. How this looks is for environments would be like this. So we have our tenant display name, which is the name of the asset here, and as well as all the various information that we collected from Microsoft. This is all my demo information here, but as you can see, we're getting the overview, domains, licenses, user license assignment, as well as privileged group membership. We'll also take a quick look at the document shared mailboxes. A lot of the structure is the exact same between all these crates. We'll dig into what the differences are here for this one. So once we go in here, this is the same sub workflow for creating the asset layouts. Then we can go into what we're doing for gathering information from Microsoft. In this case, we're going to be using a mix of Exchange Online actions as well as graph actions. One of the big key differences with the shared mailbox information crate is we do some asset linking. So in order to do that, we have a sub workflow that's going to be looking for the Hudu people contact and doing an email match on that. So once we grab this information from Microsoft, we're grabbing all the information for like the email addresses and things like that. We're going to be taking a look at the email addresses that we get from these lists and pass it to our get contact information. And what this does is we pass the email address in, and it's going to try to do an email address match off of the people's contact in Hudu. So if the mail exists, we're going to be getting the information from Hudu, and then we are going to be trying to match a contact ID. So in order to do that, we're taking that field label, looking for email address, and if it matches our passed in email address, we're going to be sending back the contact ID, which ultimately will be used to link an asset when we send the information over to Hudu. Once that's done, we have our object created that has all the information to Hudu, and we bubble up and ultimately finish out the workflow much like the other one. Here's what the shared mailboxes look like in Hudu. We'll take a look at our sales shared mailbox. This was all the information that we gathered from Exchange Online and Hudu. And you can see, because we have the company or the contact matching for the people's contact, these are records that you can click and they will bring you to the corresponding people's contact in Hudu. This concludes the demo for the addition of Hudu into the Document Microsoft 365 crates. If you have any enhancement ideas or see anything that you want to have changed, please don't hesitate to head over to our Canny board. This is where you can put in feature requests or suggest new crates. The URL for that is roost.canny.io. Thank you for your time.